Welcome to Top 10 Tuesday, and this week I want to talk about one of the greatest and most important franchises in gaming history. I am of course talking about The Legend of Zelda. So this isn't so much a top 10 as it is a ranking of the Zelda games I've played. I haven't played the CDI games and there's only one handheld game that I've gotten my hands on. So without further ado, here's my rankings. Number 10, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. I want to stress that none of these games are bad, but I will be a lot more negative in the bottom half of this list to validate why I put the games in this order. And yeah, no surprise here. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link is just a cruel, mean-spirited game that more often than not highlights all the unfair design choices that tended to plague the 8-bit systems. The game is almost impossible to navigate without a walkthrough, combat is a bitch to get around, and exploration is all risk with no reward. I admire the effort they put into the enemy types, but this is the only Zelda game that I found no enjoyment in. The game hates me, it hates you, it has nothing but absolute contempt for anyone who dares boot it up. Number 9, Skyward Sword. This is the exact opposite of the spectrum. Skyward Sword has two massive flaws holding it back. The motion controls are clunky even with the Wii Motion Plus. It makes it frustrating to fight more than one enemy at a time, but you can get used to that. The more damning complaint is how this game handles progression. They took the formula from Ocarina of Time and turned it into a mundane formality. There's a ton of items with very specific uses that can only open the designated doors they were designed to open. V is obnoxious and repeats everything you hear several times. It completely fails to give the player any credit. The only thing this game has going for it is the story, which I'd argue isn't even the best in the series, even if its iteration of Zelda is the best in the franchise. Number 8. Link Between Worlds. Okay, this is where I get a lot more positive. Link Between Worlds' biggest sin is that it's basically a remake of Link to the Past. But as such, it does what it sets out to do. I really admire how intuitive it is to turn into a painting to further explore and solve challenges. I love how every item has multiple uses. I love how the bosses oftentimes have clever ways you have to beat them. I like it all for the same reasons I like Link to the Past. But all that should be a prerequisite for a good Zelda game, and Link Between Worlds does nothing to elevate it beyond the formula. Number 7, Twilight Princess. If Zelda was a person, Twilight Princess would be its edgy teen years where it listened to Linkin Park and binge-watched Hellsing Ultimate. In other words, it had a tendency to take itself way too seriously, which isn't exactly fair. The Twilight Realm isn't structurally or even necessarily aesthetically different from the Dark Worlds and future timelines of games past. And there's plenty of the franchise's trademark sense of humor, not to mention the GameCube version probably had the overall tightest controls in the franchise. Yeah, there's other minor nitpicks like a lackluster villain, Ganondorf being shoehorned in at the last minute, dumb items that only serve one purpose, and an overworld that's big yet mostly empty. But I still strongly recommend it to any fans of the adventure genre. Number 6, Ocarina of Time. Ooh boy. Media, how can you not have Ocarina of Time number 1? This game is a masterpiece. Guys, this game is kinda overrated. Look, it's revolutionary. It was the first game of its type to make a transition to 3D. But this game is extremely poorly paced and clunky as all games on the N64 were. But even aside from that, the story structure is just another Link to the Past. It might as well be Link to the Past 3D. And it added a whole host of problems that weren't present in 2D games. And those problems went unchecked for almost 20 years because of how lavishly Ocarina of Time is praised. Skyward Sword and to a lesser extent Twilight Princess felt so mundane because of how defensive fanboys got over Ocarina of Time. And don't misconstrue me, it's number 6 for a reason, self-evident ones. And the top 5 are all games I consider the absolute best games of their respective systems, and arguably the greatest games of their generations. Number 5. The Legend of Zelda. No other game besides Super Mario Bros. Has pushed gaming forward as quickly as the original Legend of Zelda. The only reason it isn't number 1 is because, like Zelda 2, it's really unfair. Just for example, bombable walls and every other title have cracks that indicate you can bomb them. This game doesn't have this, so you're left wasting bombs on every wall. Little things like that hold this game back from absolute greatness. But perhaps no other game gave the player more agency to truly explore a vast and foreboding world with no bullshit tutorial, no overly long on-rail sections, no painfully dull prelude before the game opens up. Just press start, grab your sword, and embark on your adventure. That's something gaming desperately needs to get back to. Number 4, Majora's Mask. Yeah, I know, a lot of people consider it sacrilegious to call this better than Ocarina of Time. But this is what Ocarina of Time could have been. Same art style, same combat system, several new options for combat and exploration via the mask system, a more utilitarian approach to weapons and items, and a story unlike any other in the franchise. Twilight Princess acts dark, but only uses darkness to paint over how silly it actually is. This game is the opposite. It is truly dark and wears a twisted and eerie smile to hide the pain. Now, before I get to the top 3, I want to say all 3 of these games are among my favorites. Any of them could be number 1. The way I decided to rank them was based on how few issues I think they have. So number 3 is Breath of the Wild, the latest in the series and by far the most ambitious. It's a true open world game that gives you all the agency that had been sapped out of the franchise through the decades. It's the first game since the original to drop you into a world and challenge you to find your own path. And it's the first game since Link to the Past to actively address the gameplay issues of its forebears. And so many of the minor issues can be written off as intrinsic to the design ethos. What I don't think was a necessary sacrifice was the lack of challenging bosses. These guys are all a joke and keep me from putting the game any higher. Number 2, The Wind Waker. Perhaps no other game has captured the joy of adventuring quite like Wind Waker has. It has the best graphics, the best combat system, and the best story. The story isn't just charm and whimsy. All other Zelda games have you play as a prophesized hero with the Triforce of Courage destined to foil Ganon once again. But in this game, you definitely are not that hero. Ponder for a moment. The worst part of the game is the overly grindy Triforce quest. Think about what you're doing here. You aren't born the hero, you become him through hard work, and it's your choice. Other games experimented with Link's motivation, usually by giving him an uncle or a childhood friend that gets involved, but in this game, your sister gets kidnapped, and by the time you save her and find out about the more typical Zelda stuff, you're already more than invested enough to see everything through to the end. Aside from the aforementioned tedious bits and the laughably easy difficulty, this game is practically perfect and I'm glad it's the first Zelda game I beat. And number 1 is, by process of elimination, Link to the Past. It's boringly perfect. The dungeons are extremely well designed, the bosses are memorable, each weapon has uses in puzzle-solving, combat, and exploration. The characters are fun, the graphics are crisp, the music is my jam, the controls are tighter than Paya's ass, and it added context to the journey without bogging you down in mountains of exposition and hour-long introductory sequences. It took everything that was great about the first game and improved it on every single level, and it may very well be the best game of all time. So, how would you rank the Zelda games? What are some of your favorite franchises? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Mediocrity4, thanks for watching.